First on the agenda, or next on the agenda, is a presentation from Mike Barney on the Texas Public Safety Broadband Program. Mike is joining us from Texas. He is the Technical Services Coordinator for the Texas Department of Public Safety and Chief Engineer directing long-term evolution, or LTE 4G, for the state of Texas. This is one of the many communities to receive a waiver and begin deployment of public safety broadband network. Mike is here today to present to us on their approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you guys on the phone hear me okay?
Just fine.
All right. I have a tendency to walk around, so if you can't hear me here, let me know, but I'll try to speak up. I'm Mike Barney with the state of Texas. I work for Texas Department of Public Safety. I've been in that position for almost 2 years. Prior to that, I worked for one of the finer establishments over here in Scottsdale on the McDowell Road. I was very pleased to have spent 22 years with them. In moving to Texas, my job, I've been called a lot of different things, but my primary job is to be the LTE guy, to make it happen in the state of Texas. There's been a lot of things that have been going on. We've been meeting with FirstNet, both in other groups as well as one-on-one. Topaz, many of you are familiar with the Mesa Topaz program, clearly one of the early pioneers in this area. We were very disappointed when they were no longer able to continue, but the bottom line is public safety LTE is going to happen in the United States. It is certainly going to happen in Texas. So what I'd like to do here, I originally had this 51 slides down to 15 minutes because I was told I only had 15 minutes, so I was going to see how fast I could click the button. I understand that I have closer to 45 minutes to an hour. If you've got questions, so I'll try not to talk quite as fast. But if you've got questions, just raise your hand if that's okay.
Full agenda.
What's the option? So I know you were involved heavily with the research. Fire, security, building coverage,
my chief, now we're going to say 270 days later.
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. How's it going, sir? Good to see you. Hi. Aaron said you. Very nice to meet you. How are you doing, sir? How are you? Good.
How are you?
Good. You? Good. Good party. I know.
Good party. And Jeff, I'm calling you either.
How are you? No, I'm here. Everything good? Very good. I love you guys. Oh, no. Good to hear a couple of days.
Hi, do we have anybody on the line?
Yeah, it's Mark Benuti.
Mark?
Benuti.
Doug Chappell? Hi, Doug. Thank you for calling in.
Joe Gibbs.
Got it?
I can see you. Oh, I think, yeah. If you stand up, you push it forward a little. It's okay.
That's right. Who's over there?
I know you're there.
I was trying to hide today.
All right. Let's go ahead and get this meeting started. As always, we have a very full agenda. Multiple agenda items here. Right off the bat, I'd like to introduce some of our new commissioners. We have several new commissioners that are joining us this week that have just been confirmed. We'd like to welcome David Azulu, Commander, Emergency Management Homeland Security Division, Tucson Police Department. Glenn Brown, Fire Chief, Mayor Fire Department. And Patrick Quinn, Deputy Chief, Tucson Fire Department. As these three are joining us, we also are replacing a couple folks on our commission. Joe Anderson, Michael Brazier, Jan Hawk are being replaced by these three new individuals. In addition to that, and I think we mentioned this at the last meeting, but the governor has accepted the resignation of Sheriff Pribble from our commission. Sheriff Pribble has resigned due to increased workload and commitment to the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission and the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board. Sheriff Pribble will continue to be a strong voice and continue to work with us on many of our initiatives. And we'd like to thank all of those that have served with us over the past couple of years very much for their service and their experience and the knowledge as we've gone through many of these different initiatives. As we start the meeting, just so everybody knows, there are comment cards in the back of the room. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to address the commission towards the end of the meeting, please fill those out and bring them up to the front. Also, just to remind the commissioners that this meeting is being recorded, and so as you are speaking, please introduce yourself, especially if you're moving anything or seconding any emotions. We really appreciate that to make it easier on us to make sure all our notes are appropriate. Justin, if you will, please take roll.
Chairman Sandine.
Here.
Chief Lennon. Captain Azuelo. Present. Chief Brown. Here. Chief Bunt. Here. Chief Campbell. Here. Chief Chappell. Here. Chief Hancock. Director Orantia. Here. Chief Quinn. Lieutenant Colonel Rayner. Chief Savage. Chief Whitty. Captain Worrell. Here. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin. We've been a little amiss on approving some of our minutes, so we're actually looking for a motion to approve September 18th, November 13th, as well as March 5th. If there are no questions or objections to the minutes that have been provided.
I move to accept all three. This is Chief Bunt.
Thank you.
I'll second it. Gil Orantia.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 All three of the minutes have been approved, Justin. First on the agenda, or next on the agenda, is a presentation from Mike Barney on the Texas Public Safety Broadband Program. Mike is joining us from Texas. He is the Technical Services Coordinator for the Texas Department of Public Safety and Chief Engineer. directing long-term evolution, or LTE 4G, for the state of Texas. This is one of the many communities to receive a waiver and begin deployment of public safety broadband network. Mike is here today to present to us on their approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you guys on the phone hear me okay?
Just fine.
All right. I have a tendency to walk around, so if you can't hear me here, let me know, but I'll try to speak up. I'm Mike Barney with the state of Texas. I work for Texas Department of Public Safety. I've been in that position for almost 2 years. Prior to that, I worked for one of the finer establishments over here in Scottsdale on McDowell Road. I was very pleased to have spent 22 years with them. In moving to Texas, my job, I've been called a lot of different things, but my primary job is to be the LTE guy, to make it happen in the state of Texas. There's been a lot of things that have been going on. We've been meeting with FirstNet, both in other groups as well as one-on-one. Topaz, many of you are familiar with the Mesa Topaz program, clearly one of the early pioneers in this area. We were very disappointed when they were no longer able to continue, but the bottom line is public safety LTE is going to happen in the United States. It is certainly going to happen in Texas. So what I'd like to do here, I originally had this 51 slides down to 15 minutes because I was told I only had 15 minutes, so I was going to see how fast I could click the button. I understand that I have closer to 45 minutes to an hour. If you've got questions, so I'll try not to talk quite as fast. But if you've got questions, just raise your hand if that's okay with your protocol here.
Absolutely.
And I'll be happy to take those. I would prefer to have questions from you than me just ramble down a particular path here. What we're going to do is basically just give you a quick overview of how the state of Texas got involved in this. We were actually not the first people. The state was not the first entity inside the state. It was actually Harris County and the Harris County Hospital District that initiated the effort. Give you an idea of where we're at in the broadband program. We did a presentation on January 17th, an extremely successful presentation, we were told, by FirstNet board members and members of PSCR. And I think that has helped them understand what this can do in the future. Texas is, like many states and jurisdictions, in an interesting position. How many of you have heard of something called an RDLAP communication system? It's a data. Anybody heard of it? Somebody raise their hand? Okay, I've got a head nod in the back and a hand over here. RDLAP was a great protocol in the 80s and 90s. Most of that equipment is going end of life now. There was a large purchase. There were many large purchases in the state. Right now, my understanding in all seriousness, if you need, for some of this equipment, if you need to get spares, you've got to go to eBay or Craigslist. When you start running a system where you're depending on eBay or Craigslist, it's a very, very tenuous position. So Texas has stepped out. There's a couple of jurisdictions that are already on that have effectively EOL'd their RDLAP systems because they were able to move on to the broadband system on the Harris County. And then a technical overview of the system. I've got slides on here. I don't know how many of you guys want to hear me get into geek speak. I'll be happy to get down into bits and bytes if you like or have questions. But we'll leave the presentation here. Got my email address on it at the end, and I'll be happy to take any questions you have that way. There are 5 major routes out of the city of Houston and Harris County, population several million, when you have a hurricane come. Do I have a laser here? If you'll notice, there's 18 lanes of traffic here. There's about 16 of them that can move. There's a couple that are blocked here. But there's about 18 lanes of traffic trying to get out before Hurricane Ike comes into town. Okay, this is pretty typical. You multiply this by 5. These are the people that have cars, that have gas in the cars, and have the ability to get out. There's a lot of people in metropolitan areas that either can't drive or don't have vehicles or were not able to get some other type of transport out. So the state of Texas is extremely interested in those hurricane and other prone areas. How do we take care of those people and get them out of harm's way as quick as possible? Texas, other than avalanches, there's not too many different scenarios or maladies that that don't hit Texas. We actually have started having earthquakes. I'm not going to get into the political issue of whether they're coming from certain types of new activities underground, but the bottom line is that there are very few different types of maladies that don't hit Texas. Despite many people thinking that the state of California has the most presidentially declared disasters, in reality, Texas has more than California by better than 50%.
Marketing.
Yeah, this shouldn't be part of your tourism.
Yeah, come to Texas in late August or September. Okay. We've got a video here in a minute. What I'm going to do is just go through this very quickly. There were almost 200 people that died in Ike. Okay, this was 2005. Ike was a very strange storm because although it looks like right here, it's very clear where it's coming right up through here to Houston, about 10 hours before this was made, Ike was going to go straight. Okay? Now, that may not seem like a big deal till you realize this is a couple hundred miles. A lot of it's in very low areas. When you have, for those of you not familiar with hurricanes, you typically have very heavy rains well in front of the storm. So trying to get from Corpus Christi resources there for evacuation, going perpendicular to the path of the hurricane is not an easy thing to do. You're not going to be driving 75 miles an hour down the road because the road has got inches of water on it and a lot of people trying to get out of the way. And there's still 23 people that are missing. We simply don't know where they're at. Like many large cities, there's a large number of people that are unable to drive themselves out or go to the airport on their own or otherwise get outside of harm's way. This is one of many different nursing homes. The state of Texas, if you look at the number of people, just like Arizona, there's a large number of retirees and people in the state of Arizona that are unable to, immediately go anywhere they want. This is fairly typical, and you'll see in a minute there's about 33,000 people. This is the aftermath of Ike, and actually this is in an area where the houses were actually better built. There was a New York Times front page story right after Ike where it showed all the houses were knocked down except for one, and it turned out that was built by an engineer who had it built to actually withstand a Category 3. But the bottom line is this is pretty typical aftermath of a hurricane. There's not a lot you can do about it. You certainly can't try to ride it out. More pictures. I hope my description is good enough for you on the phone here. One of the things that the city of Houston did is they opened the Astrodome up. There's about, if you count all the beds in there, there's about 1,000 beds in here. Okay, it was still hot. Power was off, but at least people had a dry place to stay and shelter. So I'm trying to paint a picture here. There are very predictable, although not the specific time and place, there are very predictable events the state of Texas knows that we're going to run into, and we've got to have an assured communication system where we're not competing with other cellular users. We don't have to worry about, one single large tower getting knocked over and the entire system going down. At this point in time, Justin, let's go ahead and play that movie. I'm going to show you a picture of the road system in southeast Texas. You're going to see a lot of little dots. Each one of those dots is a Sprint cell phone that a hired bus or coach driver has got with him so we can keep track with him as well as redirect those particular buses. And you'll see right down here, we were pretty confident Ike was going to hit. This is at 3 a.m. in the morning, 4 a.m. Okay, let me make sure I'm not in somebody's way here. And you'll notice all of a sudden, you'll see more buses headed down from San Antonio toward the Corpus area. And then all of a sudden, about noontime, the weather report comes in and guess where it's going to hit? It's not Corpus. So we've got to be able to very, very quickly redirect all those buses. And it's many, many hundreds of buses. We've got to be able to redirect those and get the ones that we get sent to Corpus over to Harris County in the Houston area and then get them back out. Primarily headed to San Antonio and then north. Everything, Dallas is right up in this area, to many places effectively kind of in a zone up here that's out of harm's way. Normally when the hurricanes come in, they'll typically end up, by the time they get 200 to 300 miles inland, and Dallas is about 300 miles from the coast, it's just a heavy rain. The winds are usually not nearly that bad. But does this make sense now, how the logistics problem you've got? You've got to have the buses at the right place, well ahead of where the storm is going to be there, to be able to pick up the people that have to get out of harm's way that can't help themselves. All right, that's good, Justin, thanks. So in a little different perspective of that, there are many loading hubs that the city of Harris County has. Again, it's key that you have the hubs at the right place. If you have them all downtown, you're going to miss people in Midtown, you're going to miss people out closer to the suburbs. So you've got to figure out where's the right place to have that. When you get down to Galveston down here, the approaches to Galveston are very low. Galveston is effectively at sea level or a foot or two above it. So with a little bit of storm surge, Galveston is a tough place to get in and out of during a hurricane. Now this, I think, is the slide that shows Harris County, the primary roads around it. Each one of these dots here is a nursing home. Okay. I don't know that there's 1,000, but there's clearly hundreds. Okay, and they may have anywhere from 5 people in them. Some of these have several hundred people in them. So not only do you have to send the right number of buses to each one, you've got to get them there at the right time. You've got to be able to determine, did they get everyone? Do I need to send an extra bus out? It is not a trivial management problem to make sure that you've not only gotten everybody out, but as it says here, every nursing home has to be individually checked in by local emergency management staff to ensure that everybody is out of harm's way. So these are the types of problems that I'm describing here to show you why this is a very immediate need, particularly in the coastal areas and in particular in Harris County and Houston, Texas. Okay. We also, you guys had wildfires here. I should say we had wildfires here 4 or 5 years ago. Texas is no different than that. Texas has probably as many wildfires as the state of Arizona does, if not more. This was the McDonald Observatory right here. You can see a fair number of little sparks here. You can see the back of here where the entire mountain is on fire. Providing smoke jumpers and other people to manage that is a massive issue, as those of you who are in that business know. So let's go a little bit now to the background of when Texas started working on this and what we've been doing. Harris County actually started looking at public safety LTE in about 2009. Shortly after Harris County, and that was their IT department, took the lead on that, the Harris County Hospital District realized, because they have a large interface with nursing homes and other entities there, realized that they should look at that too. Harris County initially was funded through port security grants. The Port of Houston, Galveston, is the largest port in the world for petrochemicals. 40% of the energy that comes into the U.S. comes in through that port. So the port was also very interested in ensuring that they had, in difficult times, that they had assured communications. There was an issue that came up. The FCC quickly realized that while there may be 5,832 jurisdictions in the state of Texas, that they probably couldn't deal with each one of those if they all applied for their own waiver. So they asked the state of Texas to apply for a waiver in early 2011, and Texas was granted a statewide waiver in May of that year. And I think that was important, because what that said is that the federal government didn't realize that there's a lot of statewide coordination that's required. There's a lot of other types of management that's required that you're not going to be able to do at 100, much less 5,800 different entities. So in participation with Harris County, and we work with them very, very closely, we decided that we're going to aggressively pursue getting LTE, not just for Harris County to address the problems that we just talked about, but also to try to do this for the entire state. In the last 2 years, the state of Texas has filed over 1,800 pages with the Federal Communications Commission to get a waiver, to be able to actually do this. And it's called an interoperability showing. It's basically a very thick document that tells you everything you would want to know and 10 of your best geeky friends would like to know about the technical specs of your system. Excuse me. That was approved, interestingly enough, in July. It allowed us to operate for 31 days, and that had to do with FirstNet coming on board. In February of last year, FirstNet was stood up as far as the legislation went, and so a lot of federal government agencies were trying to figure, okay, how do we balance all this out? We want some states and entities to move forward, but we've also got to figure out how to manage this from a holistic point of view. So in August, we applied for a 6-month temporary authority. That was also recently, back in March, that was renewed for another 6 months. Harris County has been granted an STA for 14 sites. STA is Special Temporary Authority that allows you to operate a radio system within specific operational parameters. Excuse me. And that's for all 20 megahertz of spectrum. One of the key elements of public safety LTE is there's 10 megahertz of bandwidth up and there's 10 megahertz of bandwidth down. And by the way, there's only one channel. There's one channel up and there's one channel down. So we can't split that. You take 5 megahertz and I'll take 5 megahertz. You have to zone that, and you do that by having very small cells in dense areas and you have very large cells in other areas. And if I need more capacity, then I end up adding more cells and shrinking the size of each cell for that. And then from there, FirstNet started having the board members were announced at APCO last year in the fall, and they stood up. They've done a great job. They have a tremendous job ahead of them. And so what Texas decided to do is, because again, it's in our interest to ensure that particularly for the next hurricane season, which starts end of May, to make sure that the citizens that need help are going to have the communications from public safety professionals to do that. So we decided that we were going to show them specifically what LTE could do in a public safety environment, and we went off and actually on January 17th gave them a demo. We put them 2 different places. The first is we decided to put them in helicopters, in boats, in vehicles, let them talk to people that were actually using it. City of Baytown probably has more extensive use of public safety LTE right now than any other entity in the country, just because they've been using it, refining it, and providing feedback for that. We talked about technical details of the network with them, why we thought some options were better than others, and then also discussed this is not a network from a financial point of view that's going to happen and everybody's going to be happy with. Realize that for whether it's Phoenix or Tucson or any other fire, police, ambulance responder, you have a competitive choice. FirstNet has to not be losing money in less than 9 years from now. That means they've got to have a value proposition out there that public safety officials are going to want to move on to. If that proposition is not there, then people will continue to buy parts for their RD lap system and try to keep that going, or they'll go to some other type of data system. And I keep referring this to as a data system. I think for a very long period of time, it is going to be without mission-critical voice. There are some people that are saying you'll have mission-critical voice very soon. I think there's some good reasons to be very cautious of that. But the whole point in the Baytown area was to show them from a responder's point of view, what is this going to be like? You know, what can you actually do with it? Why does this need to go forward now? Is this making sense? Any questions, comments? Okay. So we had formal discussions with officers that were using devices every day, everything from little handheld devices to devices that effectively made your car a Wi-Fi hotspot using the LTE as a backhaul. You can see down here in the bottom right, Texas Highway Patrol has 3 river patrol vessels with 3 300 horsepower engines on them. and that's primarily for the Rio Grande because there's a lot of drug trafficking down there. You'll notice they also have some fairly large weapons mounted on each side. We put them on those vessels and vehicles and let them talk with the users and show them how LTE is making those particular systems work better. We also put them in a helicopter, and we also picked up, the helicopters have cameras in them, both thermal and visible. That link does not use LTE to go down, but it uses a proprietary link to go down. We were able to take the back end of that proprietary link, and then we were able to put that into the LTE system, and then once we had done that, then we were able to push that out to individual officers in the field. So in one of the demonstrations there, we were actually able to have the helicopter fly by, and the officer who was holding the little handheld LTE device was watching the camera pan around him as the helicopter flew by. So those types of capabilities are there today. Everything we did in this demo, there's no magic, there's no smoke and mirrors. All of it is real-type capabilities today. Then we went to a place called Disaster City. How many of you guys have heard of Disaster City? Okay, you may have taken training there. This is literally a little city set up. It's about half a square mile that is set up on Texas A&M campus. And Disaster City is there for the purpose of training first responders, for determining better methods to solve problems, and to figure out how new equipment works. They have people, for instance, they were telling us to make air tanks, send out new air tanks. At Disaster City, in about 2 months, they will go through literally 10 years. They'll put those air tanks through about 10 years of effectively equivalent practice. So it's a very good place to do demonstrations. It's a very good place to test things in communications capabilities. Any Aggies here? Okay.
What's an Aggie?
Great. Good question. What we did when we got them to College Station, to Disaster City, is we gave them 3 scenarios. The only thing that were not real about the scenarios here is the bomb, the guns used. None of these were real, but the scenarios were absolutely real and authentic. The first thing that we did is this. If you look up in the top left here, this is actually a building that they use for training people on how to deal with collapsed building. You can look on the right side. You can see a car has been crushed, and we actually had a victim placed over here. You'll see in a moment. Actually placed in the inside the rubble. So the top line of this slide says, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then what are 3 worth? You've got FirstNet board members inside of a large emergency operations center here at Disaster City. Up on the top left here, if you can see, that's actually the view of the rubble pile right there, where the laser's pointing. If you go to the right hand, that's actually a pole camera view from what would be like a typical street camera of a very, very small section of that. And then right down here, this is actually one of the incident commanders. He's actually looking at the blueprint of that building. All of this was pulled up in real time, just like you would if you already had access to building blueprints. It was pulled up in real time, and you were able to show that to the FirstNet board that this is the type of thing you can do with LTE. We were able to push out the blueprint of this building to the guys in the field so they could look on their little handheld device and see where they were and see what the blueprint of the building said. The other thing we did is we were able, over the LTE system, to literally take, how many people know what a rebel camera is? Okay, it's basically, for those of you that don't know, it looks like a fat fishing rod with a little camera on the end that you stick down in rubble and turn it, and you're looking for people. This is actually a picture from the rubble cam, and you've got the guys down here. It's hard to tell, but this guy up here actually is sticking the rubble cam in right here. This is the picture he's getting. Now, one of the things that's nice about this, and it's not that this responder needs somebody to tell him that that's where the guy's at. You can have third parties assess this particular victim right here in real time. Does he have lacerations? Are there compression type of problems? So the rubble camera was literally transmitted back. What you couldn't see on that the screen. The fourth screen, which is back to the left, actually had the picture of the victim from the rubble cam on there. Then we were able to put him in transport. And again, the only thing that wasn't real here is we really didn't collapse the building, but the entire scenario was precise. We were able to put him in the back of an ambulance here and perform something called telemedicine. Okay, we had somebody here that was playing the role of a doctor. Here you can see this is actually an EMT in the back of an ambulance. He's got the 12 lead hooked up. It's hard to see the guy here because of the mask and everything else on his face. This is live. This is over the LTE system. If you come in and look at this picture, and this is a little bit harder to see, can you see here on the screens? There's the picture of the guy in the ambulance, and then over here there's some different buttons and things like that for looking at. There's also some data in here, and it did not come out in these pictures, but it's getting respiration rate, it's getting all the vitals that you would send back to a hospital. So the whole point is now your golden hour, you're able to extend that out a little bit. You're able to give a better assessment. In this case, the scenario was there was a crush injury, and the doctor was able to look at that and give specific advice to the rescuers and then also to the medic in the back of the ambulance. Does it make sense so far? Questions or comments or tacky remarks? Okay. The second thing that we did, if you look in this picture, there is a DPS vehicle here and there's a bomb robot right here. A little hard to tell, and if you happen to know, there happens to be a little bitty box right there to the center right that is our simulated bomb. This is actual, what you see on the right here, this is the actual bomb robot camera. There's two of them. This is actually at the point of detonation. They're using a water shot on here to disable this simulated bomb. You can literally just barely see the water hitting it. You can see the water going off to the side. This is a close-up view of it. This is a view actually about a second before from a police vehicle that is sitting back about 100 yards with the camera aimed in. This is the view from inside. It's hard to tell, but you're actually watching the bomb robot here. The point being that everything that's going on out in the field that is important with LTE is very easy to push back not only to other responders, but also to push back to incident command staff. Now, in this incident, just before the bomb was detonated, we decided that we wanted to mix the technology and have a simulated FBI bomb expert say, cut the blue wire, cut the red wire. So we were able over LTE to hold this gentleman right here is the College Station Bomb Squad. That picture is actually coming to you by LTE. This picture is coming to you by Skype. This is coming to you, this is actually the incident commander, that's coming to you over the network. This whole thing is using Skype as a commercial application on LTE. The point being that we're using LTE. So I don't just have to talk to this handheld device to that handheld device. I can talk to anybody with any cell phone in here with LTE. I can tie it into any LMR radio. I can even take the very same Skype application that you can talk to your kids or parents or others with. We were able to use that, and nothing fancy. We literally pull Skype up on one of the browsers, called our bomb expert, tied in this over LTE. They made a decision, and the scenario went forward. The last scenario that we did was an active shooter in a theater. Everything in here is real except the scenario. You know, we didn't actually have a real shooter. The gun was a blue training gun, but we had somebody snap a picture of it and send that in to our simulated 911. As you can see here, that's actually the picture of the guy, the suspect shooter. This is a picture of the front of the, the front of the theater. Is there a little water bottle or something right here? Or? Okay, thank you. This is a little theater they have at Disaster City because, again, they train for every type of disaster there. This is actually a live camera shot. This was a still taken off of a camera. One of the things that some jurisdictions are doing now is they are asking people that have cameras, whether it's a street camera, or in this case inside of a theater, to give them access to that camera, to have things pre-set up to where if somebody calls and says, there's a crazy guy with a gun in my theater, somebody can punch a couple of buttons, somebody can make some change in the network. Now you have that picture. We were able to take this picture out of the theater, and this was a camera that was fixed in the fixed infrastructure, and push that out over not only to the operations center, but we were also able to push that out to the officers with Alexa devices and officers with LTE modems in their cars. So they're watching this guy in real time.
Is there a particular standard that they're using to do that? Is there, so if like a theater owner is looking to purchase a new system, is there a specific standard or API or something?
I don't know about APIs on that in particular. What we have noticed is that there's a lot of, is it H.264? Okay. I think that's it. I'll look up and find out for you. And then there's a lot of just straight composite analog. And for $100, I can go buy a device that will take that analog and make it an IP address. Okay. So it's pretty easy to do. It's not real expensive. Yes, sir.
Mike, I've got a follow-up. This is Captain David Azuela. Given the events that occurred in Boston yesterday with regard to public safety, LTE, how would that have been affected with their communications? Because pretty much everything you're describing here was in queued yesterday. How would that have been affected when the cellular network went down?
Excellent question. So the biggest selling point that I see for public safety LTE is it is dedicated to public safety. Okay, and I don't know if you're reading HSIN.net. There's some reports that have come across that as to, did the cell system just get overcrowded or did they actually shut it down? I don't know at this point in time. I don't care. The fact is the network went down. It was certainly, if you were using a 3G air card as every trooper in the state of Texas does, then you have no connectivity. You have no ability to get data. Your LMR radio is still working, but you can't get a picture of the suspect. You can't get data.
Similarly, you wouldn't have been able to use your bomb robot.
Correct. However, with public safety LTE, that's a different system. That's a system that you and I would use exclusively, and I don't want to complicate the discussion with having secondary users on there, but there's a little bit of this that would be sliced off for secondary users, but the vast majority, 75 to 99%, would always be available, assuming you have power at the site, assuming that the officers at the location have the devices, they would have continuous service. The other thing that is really great about this is I know exactly where you're at, I know exactly where he's at, so I have a GPS map. When I see those pictures coming in that you're taking of that incident happening, I know the angle that they're coming from. There are analytic tools that I can then take and effectively give me a 3D view of that. Based on that, I can take the best picture and say, hey, Captain Worrell has got the best picture of this. He's in a position for this and this. There's a lot more information, and it's not raw data. If I send you gigabytes of data, you can't absorb it. But if you look at the engines that are being created for this, the situational awareness engines, if you look at a lot of the other applications that take a whole lot of video, get rid of all the non-activity and give you the essential information, I think that's going to be one of the very, very powerful things for public safety.
So at the most basic level, there are two completely separate systems. One is not affected by the other.
Correct. Now, you're going to see something that's going to contradict that in one of the last slides, but just keep that in mind that for the public safety LTE system, it is totally divested from any 3 or 4G system that's a commercial carrier right now.
Now, Mike, are you guys sharing locations with private sector carriers? Are you sharing any infrastructure, some of the power, the generators, towers?
Yes, and I'm not sure about the generator and hours. And I actually have a slide back here. You're going to get me into geek mode here pretty quick. But we have a slide back here that talks about the locations of some of the towers.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And is that only based upon the GPS enabling of the radio, the subscriber unit?
Okay, we're going to end up getting vendor specific here, but I believe that it is GPS either enabled or GPS assisted location.
So if the radio that a specific vendor uses or a jurisdiction chooses not to enable GPS, we would not have those locations.
If that were the case, that would be a true statement. I would have a hard time believing an argument that said you ought to turn the GPS location off. I know that there are...
It's generational, though, right? With some equipment
Right.
Right.
I know that there are some issues, possibly with some police unions that don't like the tracking on, but in an incident, I think it's fair to say that most people probably want to know where all their people are, and when things are very dynamic like they were yesterday, the responders probably would like for people to know where they're at.
Sometimes I believe it comes down to a cost factor, though.
It could be. I think, at least for the handheld devices, I would expect that GPS is going to be in virtually all of those. The devices that are effectively LTE modems with a Wi-Fi on the back end, I believe that even if you don't have a GPS option in there, because remember the cells on this are typically going to be pretty small. In a city like Boston, you would probably have an LTE cell every street corner. So if you didn't have GPS on there, I may not know exactly where you're at, but with a little bit of physics package that are available, I'm going to be able to put you within 50 to 100 feet of there.
Correct. So now moving to the video that you showed earlier with the buses moving in anticipation of the hurricane. Are you doing MOUs with each one of those different private entities to GPS enable their devices to give you access from the public safety perspective to their location?
What we did on those, and right now the current practice, is to give them a Sprint handset that is GPS enabled. And it's really, to a large part, it's a fleet management issue. Because as you saw there, and again, that was live data, albeit 8 years ago. That was live data of all these buses moving to Corpus and then somebody going, we've got to go this way. But I don't know what the current plan is for the state of Texas in the future, but my guess is that particularly in Harris County, that may be something that switches fairly quickly.
Okay, so my final question.
No, keep asking. This is good.
Your recommendation, the expert in this, would be that all subscriber units are GPS enabled. Barring a policy issue from a local jurisdiction.
I think that let me put a couple qualifiers on that. If there were some reason, and GPS needs a little power, it's not half, but it needs power. If that were not an issue, because when I get back in the car, I'm going to set it in the cradle and it's going to recharge it. If that were not an issue, if I didn't have any local policy issue or somebody just decided to turn it off, from a device management, I'm pretty sure that you can disable the ability to do it. Right, you can do that.
There are solutions that allow you to do that.
I can't see a good reason, Commissioner, why you would want that turned off. There might be one, but I haven't seen it. So I said, if I were a first responder and I'm not, and I'm going into a burning building or I'm going out to a strange call, I would like for people to know where I'm at.
If I may.
Yes, please.
There's actually a company down in Chandler that we've been working with the governor's office on. They're working with the Fed, Department of Justice, and the Department of Defense on some stuff. They actually have some really amazing software. It's a pretty cool tour to see what they can do. But they can actually take control of all the features on a phone through, virtual tunneling into this.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of capabilities that are coming down the pipe, I think, for that kind of stuff.
The trick on a lot of these is going to be the applications that are going to start coming out for these devices. Many of the handheld devices will be Android-based. In 5 years, who knows what they're going to be based. But when you start looking at, are you familiar with something called Urban Spoon on an iPhone or a smartphone?
I am.
Okay, how about Gas Buddy?
Yep.
Or Where Are You? Okay, so I want to know where food is at. I want to know where I can get gas. and I want to know where the other people that are responding with me are at. Why do I have to have 3 separate applications for that? Okay, why can't I have applications that work together? That's going to be the next level of this, and I think at that point in time, turning GPS on or off probably won't even be an option. So it'll be, here's where the guys are at, here's where we can get food and gas, here's where I'm at, meet in the middle type.
So this company down in Chandler, they can actually identify the good guys from the bad guys, and then they can actually put it onto a map, and they can figure out the cell phones, they can scan for the cell phones, and so they can actually color code where people are in a building. It's pretty amazing what they can do with it.
There's a lot of things like that as people get smarter, there will be more tools. How many of you guys did dial-up? Come on. Some of you guys got more gray hair than I do. Okay, now, when you were doing dial-up, how many of you guys thought you were going to get Netflix over dial-up? How many of you guys even thought of Netflix at all? And if you did, how come you're in this meeting and aren't a multi-millionaire, billionaire somewhere else? So the whole point is all this is going to evolve. Who knows what it's going to look like in 5 years? And that's, to me, that's one of the most fascinating things is, we've been working with people and companies on how do we set standards for applications. In 5 years, it may be a totally different ballgame. It may be that all the applications are on application servers, for instance, that reside somewhere, and all I have is an effective of a browser, and it's going out to 10 servers, picking up that information and giving me the information that I want, and it's giving Captain here the information he wants from the same databases but in a different view. I don't know where it's going to go. I just know that we're going to be there and we're going to be ready.
Mike, I have a question for you. Mike Worrell. You mentioned going inside buildings. Are you addressing in-building coverage at all yet?
There is a big concern with that. Okay, as I mentioned before, in metro areas, you're probably going to have at least one access point every street corner. One of the problems, though, is different buildings have different penetration rates. You don't want to be pumping gigawatts into a building to try to get coverage. I think there are some people that are looking at that. At this point in time, the state is not looking at that so much. It's just trying to get basic coverage out there, and then we're going to come back and start looking at some of the other technologies. There's some people that have some drop-along, I think they call them femtocells. There's a lot of options there. And if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely, and I can get you in touch with the people at FirstNet. They need people that are interested in trying to address that problem from an operational point of view.
Another question for you, too. You mentioned that this was originally built for Harris County. Are you hooked into the commercial network to get other parts of the state, or are you just Harris County?
For the current responders that are using this are in Harris County, and they have the ability to go onto the 3G system, the commercial system right now. In my next to the last slide here, you'll see the coverage map. Right now they have 8 as of this week. They've got 8 of 14 sites up, and that gives them some coverage, but when they go very far out, they've got to switch over to 3G.
Then as these systems touch each other, are there things in place for cybersecurity as far as things passing along between networks?
So that's something near and dear to my heart, and I hope that FirstNet takes a very serious look at how do they address hundreds of thousands of first responders getting onto the network securely to where they're authenticated, to where they meet the 7 different security attributes for cybersecurity, to where there's no issues, that I'm not going to have somebody come in and hack it. My guess and my hope is that they're going to use something similar to SIPRNet, if you're familiar with that. If they do that, I think many of the problems will have already been dealt with. But the actual security, there's some very smart people. A guy named Mark Adams, probably the best security guy in the country, that's working on this. But I don't know exactly, I don't know what it's going to look like. But I'm thinking that I'm hoping it's going to look like SIPRNet.
And then as first responders, like something that happened in Boston where you have a large concentration of responders going into an area, are we going to be in contention in some of those situations, or?
The answer is yes, but the question then is, what bandwidth do you want? If everybody wants to put up full motion HD video, then there's a serious problem. you can do, depending on whose numbers you use, 5 to 10 per cell. But if on each of your command vehicles you have an LTE access point, I can shrink the other cells around it. This is done dynamically to where now within your 100-yard area you're working off of your device. The people down there are working off of another access point. But yeah, again, there literally is one frequency. Instead of it being 12.5 kilohertz wide, it's 10 megahertz wide. So I can support video, which happens to be the lowest priority, and then it goes up to data, and there's a whole stack of 15 levels of priority for that. And then if you as a commander decide in this incident that the video needs to be higher priority, you can manually adjust that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So they've thought about a lot of the issues like that. Not all of those issues have been addressed or solved. Are we doing okay? About 2/3 of the way through the slides here. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Blake Jarman, does any of these cell sites, if any of them were to be attacked, does that stop the communication between them? Is there enough overlap of cell sites, and would that be a security problem?
Well, it's always a security problem if somebody attacks a site. But there's an interesting capability that LTE has. And we talked about it in an incident. If all of a sudden a whole bunch of commanders, for instance, show up with their vehicles that each have an LTE site on it, the LTE system is smart enough to actually reduce its footprint, and it can do that a couple of different ways. Now, I can't get 10 LTE systems in here. That's too close. But within hundreds of yards, I can do that. So when that site goes down for whatever reason, what LTE can do is it can go, it's getting really weak coverage over there, and it actually measures it. It does constant measure of signal strength in the area because you have a device out there, and you're reporting back to the tower that your power is low, and it actually can dynamically adjust that. If I have an entire area like this go out, then what happens is the towers around it will then slightly increase their power. You may not have as good a coverage. You won't have the ability to support as much video from right there standing under the tower as you did before, but you still can have it set to where you will get something. Does that make sense? Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Mike Worrell again. I got a question as far as backhaul. You were talking about backhaul. Is that microwave, fiber, or what are you using for that?
Yes and yes. There is fiber being used in Harris County. There is some microwave, and you'll see it. We'll have a diagram of that up here. I think what you're going to find is that there's a lot of different opinions on how much bandwidth you need for each site. It's called an eNode B. But the general consensus is you need a DS3, which is about 45 megabits. So you could do a metro area, for instance, with microwave, but you're going to get to a point to where you're not going to be able to get enough microwave licenses, or you're going to end up with all types of interference. So ultimately, what I think metro areas are going to have to do is be almost exclusively fiber. Now, there's some other things. Some people talk about, well, we don't have fiber. We might be able to do DSL. That's okay. But for practical purposes in a metro area, I think you're going to end up with fiber. When you start getting further out, like Arizona, you guys look at the pipeline that you built from Flagstaff. That went through some incredibly tough terrain. There's no reason to try to lay fiber through similar type terrain. That's where microwave is probably a reasonable choice. But you also have to do that trade-off of a DS3 microwave is not cheap, but it's also affordable. But if I have to do 10 of those, now my cost is going way, way up.
Were there any thoughts of taking that if there's any extra capacity on those fiber connections and interconnecting like key dispatch centers or anything along the way?
What I can do is get you in touch with the people at Harris County, the IT guys, and they can give you specifics on that. I know that they have fiber rings set up. I don't know the specifics on that. But I'll be happy to get you their contact information if that helps. Other questions or comments? Justin, you just look like you're ready to ask a question.
No.
Okay. So back to our active shooter here. Again, all this is real capability. We didn't do anything fancy. We didn't do a PowerPoint slideshow. And if you'll look here, in fact, these are actually two DPS officers. This is this is the officer that really wanted to be the bad guy. I'm not sure why. So we put him in the little hoodie and everything. And he's being chased, and literally on his next step, I would have put the video in here, but, video on this stuff on PowerPoint just starts eating up space. But anyway, here's actually the actual DPS officer in uniform. You can see him right there. You can actually see him on the ground here. His next step, he slips. And this is actually a rooftop camera from the theater that we're able to pipe back. Again, this is fixed infrastructure. This is not going over LTE. Back to the operations center, and it's going out to the LTE. Their officers out in the field are actually watching this in real time. So it's not a matter of saying, suspect in custody. You're watching the guy right here be put in custody.
Well, Mike?
Yes, sir.
You're doing this at a training facility. This is David as well. You're doing this at a training facility. Do you have, again, any kind of MOUs in place with industry, with corporate America, that we could potentially borrow from you to do similar contracts? Because we're running into the same thing where we need to access private cameras for our purposes. Do you have anything like that?
We don't currently have that. That is on the list to start looking at. Right now, you're talking to about a third of the entire LTE staff of the state of Texas. So I've been told I'm doing a really good job, but and I appreciate that, but that's not the highest priority right now. That is something I think that, God forbid there be more incidents, but we all know there will be. Particularly in something like let's just go back here. Inside a theater, if you have this type view, and the fact is, and it's ironic, one of the things I found out is one of the reasons why the theaters put cameras in there is because they want to catch the guys opening the door for their buddies from the back door to get in free. But if you had that ability then for law enforcement to go, the guys over here, the SWAT guys are going to be able to make a much more effective entry. Nobody's going to end up getting hurt in that type of situation, as opposed to coming into the wrong door, those types of things. So I think that as there are more incidents, that more business owners are probably just out of either concern for liability or for their own protection, protection of their customers, will probably gladly do that. And there's protections that you can put in here. You can literally have a mechanical switch that, makes the connection or doesn't make the connection and things like that. But,
are you aware of any states that have looked at legislation for that?
I'm not. Ask me a technical question. Those I got done. So that was very successful because we were able to show that we're not doing anything new. We're taking things that are already there. We're taking information that's already available, and we're putting it to the operations center. We're putting it to an incident commander or just the street commander, the sergeant that happened to be 5 blocks away, and he now knows exactly what's going on. You can push it to the SWAT. It doesn't matter. Once it's on the LTE system, and by the way, I can let the fire guys look at something and not let the police guys look at something, for instance. I can let EMT have access to HIPAA-type information where other people don't. It's very easy to have layers in there, to have a very large number of layers of information. So it's all there, and then based on your access abilities, if you've been in the military, pretty much like secret compartments. So that's one of the beauties of this system, is it's very open, it's very flexible. Lots of lessons learned here. These are actually 3 of the 4 board members in the helicopter taking off from Baytown going to College Station. They made the comment that real life makes a real difference, and it does. We were showing them, again, everything we did was real except we didn't use real explosives, we didn't use real guns. But from a technology point of view, everything was real and available today. We gave them actual devices. The devices were from Motorola. Motorola was very supportive of this, as was a little company called Super Circuits. They provided a lot of cameras. Great company. Made it very easy for us to hook things in. We put them in front of real users and let them talk about what works and what doesn't. And I think that was enlightening for everybody, because the users were able to say, hey, when is this coming? We need this, 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 and this. So that was one of the big lessons learned there. One of the board members, hey, this stuff really works. And, it really did. We didn't spend 2 years setting this up. We got there at Disaster City, for instance. We got there a week before and started setting stuff up, and I think on about the second or third day, we knew from the dry runs we were going to be in great shape. The biggest problem that we had was the operations center was effectively a skiff. It was a metal building, and so some of the LTE devices didn't work inside that, so you had to kind of walk over to the door to see that. But that's an easy problem to solve if you know ahead of time with a little repeater. So what we expect to do, again, we've been working with Michael Britt. We're very happy to work with Michael Britt. We would love to work with other states and other jurisdictions on helping to divide and conquer this problem. Like I said, you're talking to one-third of the entire LTE department right now for the state of Texas. I would very much like to sell the idea, and I don't think Justin knows I was going to say this, I'd like to sell the idea that it's a whole lot easier if we work together and start parsing some of these different problems out, particularly from operations. You know, Texas does things one way, Arizona and California may do it different, but there's a lot of commonality in all the practices and procedures that we want to do. Yes, sir.
I guess that would be a good segue. Can you quantify the cost differential between LTE and conventional radio solutions that we're using in Arizona?
Two different animals. First, let me again say that I don't think you're going to have mission-critical voice anytime soon on LTE systems. That's my personal opinion, and I hope that will be the official position of my employer here shortly. But that's at least my personal opinion. There's a lot of issues with that. An LMR system, in a metro area, you've got I think a repeater up on White Tank Mounds. I think you've got 4 repeaters around the area here in the Phoenix area. With the LTE, you're going to have a tower about, depending on a lot of things, out in a suburban area every couple of miles to, in a metro area, every street corner. Depending on the installation cost, an ENOD B is $60,000 any way you slice it. You look at the antennas, $100,000, $200,000 per. If you do nothing but multiply that, don't even get into backhaul cost, and look at the number of devices you would need to cover the Phoenix area here, it'll be a lot more than all of the LMR systems currently here. So you've got to look at this additional capability can I do? Because I can't sell it on an LMR replacement. And I got to tell you, from my point of view of looking at this, I think LMR is going to be mission-critical voice well after I retire, probably even after this young man retires. There's a lot of things that LMR does extremely well that LTE doesn't currently. There's no talk around on LTE right now. If the base station is dead, then we're not talking. The power out of an LTE handheld device right now is typically a couple hundred milliwatts. I'm not going to be able to do a talk around very far with that. So it's a great idea. It's something that will probably happen, but there's a lot of issues that have to get addressed first. So I'm not trying to duck your question on a hard number. I just don't know how to give you a solid number that is going to easily quantify. This is going to be supportable. Any other questions or comments? Is this good? Bad? I've got a 4:30 flight, so you guys can when you're ready for me to head to the airport, just let me know.
So Mike, based on that scenario, right, I think that's one of the challenges with FirstNet. As you said, they've got 9 years to become profitable. And what you're laying out is, in order to use voice, mission-critical voice on LTE, they basically have to replicate an entire, carrier cell network in a city, right?
Correct.
And we all know that that's taken years and hundreds of millions of dollars for each of these companies to come and invest. And in a lot of cases, they can't even do it themselves, so they have agreements with other carriers. Correct. And they have to do it, right? And they're co-locating towers and infrastructure, right? I mean,
you're making my point for me. You want to?
This is not an easy problem to solve anywhere close.
It is not a trivial problem.
Yeah. So has FirstNet delineated that yet? Have they come out and boldly said that voice is not our critical objectives?
No, they haven't. Again, let me be one of the first people to come to their defense. They've gotten a lot of people say, well, why haven't you already built out in my state? I mean, gee whiz, they haven't even been around a year yet. There's a lot of issues that they have to deal with. For instance, how are they going to deal with licenses and spectrums with states? That's something you've got to decide very early on. We hope to have all that addressed with them, and I'm speaking as somebody from the state of Texas and not from FirstNet, before the end of May. And I think we'll get there. Then I can start getting to some of these other issues. Mission critical voice, as I said, there are some vendors out there that are pushing, and they've dropped the word mission critical. But I think when you start looking at, can you give me, on a cost-effective basis, the same mission critical voice that Captain Worrell has today with his LMR system, I would challenge anybody to say yes and back it up with money.
Right.
I think that's going to be very difficult.
Yep.
It's going to be a learning. But again, there's a very good combination between these two. There's things that one of those systems does, LMR does very well, that LTE doesn't do. So it may be that we end up, instead of LTE taking over the world, as some have projected, that you have something that says, hey, for it has to be their mission critical, I know the LMR system's going to be there. For the other, LTE may be a better, if I want a picture of a suspect, I don't want to have to use the data, the 9600 bits per second, maybe get there over an LMR system, because that's going over the entire network.
Right.
If I want to provide full motion video, that's not an LMR system. Traffic controls, I can do that with LTE very well. So there's a lot of, the more I get into this, more I see that there's some very good delineation here, and one size is not going to fit all.
But those expectations are critical, right?
Well, they are. They absolutely are. And when you guys have opinions on this, the FirstNet board is very open. I'll tell you, it's hard to get a face-to-face meeting with them just because they've got so many things on. Drop them an email, though. Their emails are published, and if you don't have them, I can get them for you. But they're very open and very receptive. And, you guys are a pretty good-sized state. Our goal is to not only work just within the state of Texas, but work, particularly in the southwest area. We have a common border problem. We have a massive problem, just like you guys have. The difference is we have a river running in the middle, and that seems to me...
Yeah, we're trying to keep you Texans out.
Well, you sent me back.
And this is Mike Worrell. I'm on the Public Safety Advisory Committee to FirstNet, so if you have some concerns...
All right. Anybody speak geek here? All right. I'm actually not going to get down in this too deep. I'm going to leave these. If you guys want to talk later, getting down into this, I'll be happy to, particularly for some of your questions on the Harris County ring and things like that. I would prefer for those answers to come to them because there's a lot of nuances here. If you're not familiar with LTE, it's an incredibly complex system that you can actually reduce down to pretty simple. This is the control plane. Everything that has to be controlled, like who gets on, did you pay your bill, what authorizations do you have, are you allowed to go in this section versus that section, all that's controlled up here on the control plane. This is the data plane. The RAN is what's actually out in the field. That's radio access network. So one diagram is the radios are out here. You come into the packet gateway. You go to the serving gateway, and from the serving gateway, you either go to the internet, to your intranet, or to some other site. So it's very, very simple, and it's extremely efficient because you don't have control channel information going out on the same as the data channel. You effectively have a plane of data here that once these guys say, okay, you're okay to talk, the channel opens up and you just start talking. Let's keep going here. All right. Is this diagram clear to everybody? On the phone, what we've got here is we've got a picture of security initiatives. As I mentioned before, I sincerely hope that many of the security components that are in SIPRNet end up making it into FirstNet security. There are a lot of issues. Authentication. How do I know that you're really you? How do I know that you didn't give your device or it wasn't stolen? Auditing, I need to go back and audit something. Non-repudiation is probably going to be a big deal. How can I verify that what you sent me actually came from you, and that you can't deny sending it, that video of whatever? Because from a forensic point of view, after the fact, when we end up in court, I need to be able to prove that, yes, that was from the officer and somebody didn't do something funky with the system. There's multiple different security attributes here. I'm not going to bore you guys with it, but the whole point is that is something that FirstNet has a security committee run by a guy named Mark Adams from Northrop Grumman. I'll give him a plug. They've done a great job on this. They've done an extremely good job, and I think to the questions earlier about how secure is this going to be, I think it is going to be more secure than current systems that you've got out there that go over the air. And I think that we're going to be able to share information in a much more effective way to where you can still, for instance, if you send me the picture of a suspect in a sensitive environment, you still own the rights to that, and it's something I can view, but I can't necessarily propagate. So those types of capabilities I'm hoping are going to be built into this. But what this slide really shows is that when you come from one device up here out in the field through an eNode B, you basically are going to go through a firewall back through the packet serving gateways and then into another device. Aaron, I think you'd agree that from a topology point of view, it's actually a pretty simple diagram, pretty straightforward. And that's one of the things that I think the security guys are trying to do here, is make sure that it's not security through obscurity, but it's actually a very well-based security by the guys up in Maryland that actually have a pretty good handle on this stuff. Okay, now there was a question before about multi-network operation. Right now you're going to see a picture in a few slides of Harris County LTE coverage. And you'll have kind of a dark green and a light green on there. Right now the way that they have it, only on the 8 sites that they currently have. And remember, these sites are about the size of a cellular site, like a Verizon site. So you're not hitting a whole city with this. You're hitting a couple of miles. You can hit a little bit farther than that, but you're not going to get 10 miles off one of these sites. Okay, so it's relatively lean coverage. So what they have with that, and particularly in Baytown, is they've got areas that are not currently covered. They're using 3G. Okay, it's a fairly standard migration type of approach. They basically have a little router in the car that prefers band class 14 of the public safety LTE, but if it doesn't find that, then it'll drop back to the other coverage. So whether you're operating on band class 14, and they call it BigNet, and I forgot the acronym for BigNet, but it's a broadband interoperable gateway network or something like that. I apologize to anybody from Harris County if I got that wrong. But, and then also they have air cards, basically, from Verizon that they're using to provide extended coverage outside that area. There is not a connection between the two networks. And for a lot of reasons, that's probably a pretty good idea right now. And then the mobile routers, you go one or the other. Now, realize that that doesn't mean that if I have to switch that all the data, half the data I just sent, I lost. There's actually, you actually have multiple VPNs going in here, one from the Harris County BigNet system and then one from the, and they all meet back at the server and they work out all those details. So it's not an optimal solution, but the fact is it works. Again, this is the first live system in the country. There's going to be a tremendous amount of problems that they're going to run into, but I got to tell you, these guys have worked incredibly hard, and I think they've done a pretty good job. They've got a system that the officers want to keep using, and I think that says a lot right there. Because if it wasn't working, to me it seems like officers are usually the first ones to say, give me this back or get rid of this thing. Okay, now, there was a question earlier about microwaves and things like that. You can look up here, and I'll confess to you now I'm colorblind, so whether that's green or gold or yellow, I don't know. But that color right there is the microwaves. On many of these towers, you have microwave connectivity. Ultimately, the plan is to have fiber everywhere, and you can see that they've got one major fiber here, and then they've got some other lease fibers on some of these other lines here. So, questions or comments on this? Does this make sense? Perfectly clear to everybody? There's a test afterwards. Okay. E and B is E node B. That's basically the base station that sits at the bottom of the tower. Some of these other names, Wharfen H actually is the name of a site. IK, McElroy Park. This is actually all public information. If you were really bored, you could actually go look this up on the FCC site to find the locations. But the bottom line is, this is a little bit more descriptive picture here as to where they're at. There are 7 sites. Just a second, Aaron. I'll come back. There are 7 sites currently, actually 8. There's an 8th site literally right here on the northwest corner of Loop 610. So they've got coverage almost into downtown Houston. Now, the dark color here, which supposedly is green, that's where they have coverage from the car back out. Remember, the car or the handheld device are only putting out, I think the cars are only putting out a couple of watts. The handheld devices are putting out, I think it's 200 milliwatts. Whereas the towers, their ERP, I think is 422 watts. So obviously they can get out. And you'll notice one of these really neat features in Texas. You'll notice how their radiation pattern precisely stops, very precisely stops at the county border. I thought that was pretty good. Maybe you guys can do that too. Yes, sir.
So one of the things that becomes really clear to me is the skill sets required, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, is going to be drastically different than the skill set today, right? Especially when you're getting into complex packet switching and trying to change priority of traffic on the network and trying to overlap and fail over networks. And security is just going to become critical. And like you said, validating that video feed came from that officer and doing a chain of evidence control, it changes. It changes dramatically. Is that something you guys are talking about? Because it's a struggle just to find IT people in general. Now you've got another industry that's going to be competing for the same resources, right?
So if I tell you our secret plan, will you not go into competition with us?
Absolutely.
Actually, this is another area where we can work together. We're working on something called the University Plan.
Okay.
And the goal here is to get young people in business as well as in technical areas interested in public safety communications, bring them on, try to let them actually get involved in their junior and senior year, and then hopefully they're in a position where this is something they'd like to do. The technology is going to change very rapidly. As I said, I don't know what the applications are going to look like in 5 years. I can't even tell you what my iPhone applications are going to look like in a year. But I know that they're going to be different. So our goal, and again, this is something, we've got a short plan written. We've got some other priorities above that. But our intent is to start trying to work with universities here, probably 6 months to a year time frame. And try to start getting programs going. Some of these would be great senior projects. So that's one of the things that we're looking at there, because while I consider myself a geek, I have 2 sons in engineering school, one at U of A and one at LSU, and they're way over my head. So, yes, sir.
So along those same lines, you mentioned SIPRNet earlier. Would biometrics or dual factor authentication be something that's being evaluated right now on the radios?
I hope they have at least a couple of those. In some cases, they're going to need an option. If you got a fireman with a glove on, my guess is you don't want him taking the glove off to authenticate in. You might be able to do iris scan. SIPRNet is two-factor authentication. There are, and there's a lot of other things in there too. And it doesn't have to be SIPRNet. My point for that is that it's something that has been very, very well vetted. But there are many different things. And again, as following in the conversation with Aaron, there may be something in 5 years authentication-wise that we don't even know about today. So we'll see. Thank you very much.
We're running close. Yeah, towards our time and have several other presentations.
Okay.
Might I suggest maybe we set up a conference call for additional follow-up questions?
And this is what it's going to be with 14 sites, and then obviously with the 90 sites that will precisely cover the boundaries of Harris County here. That's several years off. We're working with numerous different entities here. Coast Guard is very interested in this. There's a lot of law enforcement that goes on with the Coast Guard in the port area. The Sheriff's Office, Harris County ITC, which is their technology center, obviously DPS and Texas Department of Transport. TxDOT has, just like ADOT, has a tremendous amount of fiber in the ground. And then the city of Baytown is really kind of the guinea pigs here, the initial users in the city of Houston. Infrastructure sharing view. I can talk to you more about this, and the Harris County guys even more. The current 14 sites, there's 7 different owners of the site. So that, I got to tell you, for guys that are in contracting, I'm impressed. That is not a trivial effort. There's the ownership view. Again, you've got this. You can pass that out. Some more details on the site. Protecting Baytown. Again, there's about, as of, I think, the last few months, there's about 40% of all refined energy products going to and through the U.S. go through Galveston and Houston Ship Channel area. That's it. Mike.Barney@dps.texas.gov, or if that's too hard, LTE@dps.texas.gov. I get that too. So if there's any other questions, if we got time, if not.
And I would mention that the presentation is on our website right now, and as usual, we'll be posting the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mike.